Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Never before in the history of sports podcasts have two men brought you opinion and analysis like these two. They speak for a city that's desperate for wins and titles, not whining and travesty. You might not agree with what they have to say, but you'll defend their right to say it. Sports fans across the world, from Chicago, Illinois, this is the Mac and Reed Show.
And good evening, everybody. Welcome into another edition of the Mac and Reed Show right here on the Barroom Network. And we are live on YouTube on the Barroom Network channel as we speak here. For the audio-only versions for our show podcast format, you can search Barroom Network wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, iTunes, all that good stuff. Like, subscribe, tell a friend or two. If you're watching live on the YouTube stream right now, you're welcome to chime in, of course, as we begin. We have a lot to get to on the show today as far as Bears talk, NFL in general. And by the way, follow us on Twitter. Follow me at The Real Evan Mac. Follow Ross at Ross Reed, of course, and Barroom at Barroom Network for all breaking Bears news and show updates, all that great stuff. A lot to get to on the show today. As I mentioned, Bears at length, ad nauseum, because this team is just god awful, and we'll dive into all aspects of it. Ross, the good Bears fan he is, traveled to Kansas City and will give us his takes from that experience. It was a walloping that the Bears took from the Chiefs and Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce and everybody in Kansas City. And then we'll look ahead to the Broncos game this Sunday. And then, of course, we'll be going around the NFL, separate the contenders from pretenders, some individual players that are really jumping out so far offensively, defensively. Breaking NBA news today that we will go into later at length. A big trade that you move some of the rankings and odds of championship teams, of course, making the rich get richer. I'll put it that way. We'll discuss that later on. It's just a bad time for Chicago sports in general. We might chime in on the whole landscape. But Ross, a good trip to Kansas City besides the Bears loss? How was that?
It was great. I had a blast. I appreciate everybody in Kansas City for their amazing hospitality, except for United Airlines, who found a reason to have a friend of mine's checked bag still on the airplane when we landed for 2 hours because it was raining in Kansas City. So that part was a bummer. But the people of Kansas City were absolutely amazing. Went straight from the plane to Oklahoma Joe's for some great barbecue. Got to party in a nightclub that evening that had Jackson Mahomes in it, as well as Brittany Mahomes. They were literally at a table right next to me. So it was a star-studded weekend. And of course, the game itself, the tailgate is top-notch. It's the best tailgate I've ever been to in my entire life. That's just worth the trip alone, obviously. And then, a couple sections away from Taylor Swift. First time I've ever been in the building with her, because I'm not a Swiftie. You'll never see me at a Taylor Swift concert, so that's probably the closest I will ever get to Taylor Swift. But all in all, it was fun.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like a blast. Good weather for it. Everything turned out great, seemingly. As far as everything except the football game, based on that, based on that trip. And Taylor Swift now has performed this year in 20 NFL stadiums. That's more than any player is going to play in the regular season. Pretty unbelievable. And we'll talk about her effect throughout the NFL in a little bit as well. Mm-hmm. Now to the game briefly, as we just talk about the Bears as a whole, and it was just as lopsided as you could get. And we missed this past week, but we were going to trash the Bears anyways and not give them a chance to win this game, if I may speak for Ross. But I don't know if we had predicted a beatdown as bad as this at 41-10, where it was unwatchable past that first half. You just felt like, wow, just this is too much between coaching, offense, defense, all phases were it was total disarray. It was an epic loss. I struggled for a headline in our title that appears with this video on the Barroom Network. And I went with Bears look completely lost, because that seemed to sum it up pretty well in my eyes. And I can expand on that. I feel like this was one of those games where against the Chiefs, where it was like the early college football games in the season where Ohio State plays UTEP or you know, San Antonio State Tech or some school that has no business sharing the same field as them. And again, just bad in every aspect of football. And the offensive tape was just truly awful for a number of reasons. Injuries aside, it just looked like coaching again. Luke Getsy not changing up his game plan at all. One designed run in the first 3 quarters was just unacceptable to me when people have been harping on it, and it just has translated to more yards, more touchdowns historically. But outside of that, obviously, the offensive line, going back to complete disarray, it's looking real bad. When Braxton Jones went to IR, you knew it went from bad to worse to even worse, getting Larry Borum shuffled in and Jatir Carter. And now it's getting so bad where you might have to move your one seemingly healthy guy, knock on wood, and Darnell Wright from right to left. You're considering that. But then the wide receivers too, just Jesus, DJ Moore drops, Chase Claypool not giving his best effort out there. And Darnell Mooney irrelevant. That's your big 3 wide receivers. Cole Kmet just not struggling to really get a lot of action as well. Everyone is to blame. And, I get that Justin Fields' potential is being ruined. It comes back to him. He's put into awful situations repeatedly, but he's not without blame. Everybody is to blame, from anyone on the offensive line to the quarterback to the coaching, as far as offense is concerned. The defense, a mess due to injuries too. We've seen the secondary just take hit after hit. And again, it happened on Sunday. There's no pass rush from Yannick Ngakoue to anybody on the defensive line, the rookies. The defense is just struggling so bad in the bottom of the league, in every sort of ranking you could put them in points allowed and yards allowed in general. They're third to last in the league, and total yards allowed. It's awful. Travis Kelce, you should probably double cover him. It was a game of polar opposites, and Ross, you were there to witness it all. I don't know if there's one thing that could be the most disappointing aspect of it for you, because it's really, it seems to be just tied because everything is just so garbage. But if it's coaching, offense, defense, what was the most disappointing thing you've seen after that week 3 loss?
Yeah, to me, it goes hand in hand with, this team is very poor coached and very poor prepared. And you can see that because, in contrast, you had the defending champs on the other side who, Andy Reid's going to be in the Hall of Fame one day as a head coach. But, they're Steve Spagnuolo, Matt Nagy, old friend alert, Dave Tobe. These are good quality coaches that have been around the league for a long time. They know how to get these guys prepared to a game. And, I was looking today at I'm bearing down on Twitter at I'm bearing down. He does a great job of doing like every drop back of Justin Fields and every snap with different players and stuff like that. You start looking at these snaps, and these guys aren't open, or they're giving half speed effort. The scheme is dog shit. It just looks like a very poor prepared team. And then to go on top of that, there are no blue chip athletes on this team. There are no big time playmakers on this team, right? Where's Darnell Mooney been? Darnell Mooney has 4 catches in 3 games right now to start this year. This is a guy in a contract season. We talked about Chase Claypool and his struggles to block and to get open and stuff like that. Even DJ Moore had a couple of big drops. There's nobody on this team making plays right now. Quarterback isn't, the wide receivers aren't, the offensive line isn't, and your offensive coordinator is not scheming these guys open. I think people forget this was a 7-0 game at the end of the first quarter. It didn't start getting crazy until the second quarter, but the Bears were hanging in there. But when you want to play the defending champions, you got to punch them in the mouth right away. And I didn't see any kind of big play ability from the scheme and from the players on the football field. And then the Chiefs finally said, all right, enough is enough. Let's kind of put our foot on the gas here. And they did. And they exploded in that second quarter for 28 unanswered points or 27 unanswered points, whatever it was, right? And that's when things got ugly. This game was over definitely by halftime, but I think people forget this was a 7-0 game to end the quarter. The Bears just weren't able to put anything out there, and then they just got boat raced in the second quarter. So again, this goes back to me. I think this coaching staff stinks. I think they're one of the worst coaching staffs in the league right now. I think they're very vanilla on offense and defense. So you have no big play capabilities on either side of the football. You don't even get special teams big plays right now. So, that situation is piss poor. And then you don't have the talent on their team to keep up with a Pat Mahomes, who has a play where he scrambles, he switches the ball from his left hand back to his right hand and then throws it to Travis Kelce for for a 15-yard play. That's just absolutely absurd. You don't have those kind of guys on your roster to make those kind of plays. And so, it's just the whole thing is a mess right now. Obviously you go against the defending champs. They were going to get their butts kicked. That was just a foregone conclusion. You weren't going to be able to hang out with those guys. Also, the Chiefs didn't really look good to start the season, so they wanted to kind of go out there and say, okay, this is our game. This is our get right game 3 games in the season because we want to have another Super Bowl run. And the Bears just weren't equipped for it. So, it doesn't surprise me. I think I might be in the minority. I think that just watching a lot of tape from Justin Fields, I don't think he played poorly. I think he still made mistakes and missed some layups, as he's been prone to do so far early on in his career. But I don't think he played that poorly. This team this sucks. This roster stinks. The scheme stinks, and he's kind of put behind the 8 ball right now, in addition to him not being a very good quarterback.
Yeah, you got to go back to Justin Fields before we even talk about the defense and the coaching as a whole. And 3 games into the season, that conversation has been around Justin Fields that could play at an MVP type of level. He could take this big jump, whether it be passing or rushing, just putting points up and getting this offense to that top tier, especially with revamped weapons and all that. And I went back and forth. It's been tough to see him struggle as much as he has. And, you can make every excuse in the book for him. And then they aren't just excuses, they're realities where this guy, you put a Pat Mahomes on this Bears team, he's going to stink. He has to mesh with these 10 other guys at every given time at certain times of the game, at least, to try to be competitive. And Justin Fields hasn't been given that opportunity. I know you said that, you may have been in the minority, but I feel like for every Bears fan and for every, every person in the media, talking head in the media, has said that it's on Justin Fields and he's never going to pan out. There's a lot of people that say this is an organizational disaster. And, when you think about on paper how they were set to flip the script, still be bad, but still fill a lot of needs, offensive line, just injuries aside. Think about that. Look at the offense in general. Your top 3 receivers are still out there. They need to go and get some of these jump balls. They need to help Justin Fields out. Justin Fields still making those bad decisions because he's set up to fail with this lack of any sort of imagination. Going back to Luke Getsy and this play calling, the fact that he's still coaching is pretty mind-boggling. You'd think he'd be on the shortest leash possible when the Bears have dropped 0-3. If they lose against the Broncos, fire everybody, fire Eberflus and company. And, looking at the defense, if I can just pivot to that, it's just as bad. And it's just nuts to me to see that, it falls on Ryan Poles too, right? When you think about the way this roster is assembled and you swung for these linebackers and injuries do happen. But, look at the Green Bay Packers, right? In the same division as you. They gutted out that game and they won Sunday and were able to win. And I know a lot of that's on Jordan Love just being a superior quarterback at first to some extent, but had a ton of injuries too. You're in this league for a reason. So the defense, it falls on them. Certainly. I don't know what to say about Eberflus and coaching besides it's just been an abject disaster. I know that you've talked about it at length, Ross. They really needed to look at an offensive minded coach to try and help Justin Fields' development. And I don't know where to go from here, but it looks like, 3 games in the season that we're not going to see much more of Eberflus and Getsy in the near future. And let's not forget, too, this whole week of distractions where there's $100,000 worth of equipment stolen from Soldier Field doesn't affect the players as much. It's just a bad look. But the whole Allen Williams situation was really weird. And then Justin Fields, circling back to him, well, I started talking about this, he can put blame on others because there's 10 other guys at every given play that are missing assignments. They have to be a cohesive unit, and he's not getting that. And I don't see how he can get any sort of success with this roster as it is right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You hit it on the head. This is just complete organizational failure from top down, and this has now been a trend over the last couple of years with the McCaskey family. You look at the last 4 head coaches that the Bears have had. It's been John Fox, who had like a 200 winning percentage. You've gone to Matt Nagy. You had Mark Trestman in there, and now you have Matt Eberflus. All 4 of those guys have been failures, and you have 3 guys who are first-time head coaches in the NFL, and then you have one guy who was a veteran head coach, but was kind of a dinosaur, and he really was just a placeholder to kind of get the culture back on track, right? You hire a lot of guys who are first-time general managers, and they're doing this job for the first time. Chicago is a big market city. You don't have to act like this is some small market town where you don't have to spend the money to get big names in here. And I think that's part of the problem. I think the McCaskies as a whole are a very plain and vanilla family who want to play things safely. And that's where you've got the last couple of years. You've gotten your Mark Trestmans and your Matt Nagy's and your Phil Emery's and your Ryan Pace's and now Ryan Poles. You hire Bill Polian because you don't know how to do the job yourself to go out there and find these guys for you. He gave you Ryan Poles, but then he also gave you your 3 final head coaches. He gave you Jim Caldwell, he gave you Matt Eberflus, and he gave you Dan Quinn. That's not exactly putting a lot of excitement or ingenuity into this situation. That's not moving forward. All 3 of those guys are older players. 2 of them are defensive players. You have a weapon like Justin Fields. You didn't put the scheme around him. You didn't put the talent around him. You didn't talk to a guy like Mike McDaniel, who is crushing it right now in Miami. You didn't even have a conversation with him. Why? Because he's quirky? Because he smokes a vape pen? Like what's the issue? Now all of a sudden, look at how Tua Tagovailoa is playing and that whole offense. So it's an organizational failure from top to bottom. And like a lot of stuff in this town with our sports teams, as long as this ownership is in place, do you really have any confidence that's going to get fixed? Because what's the difference between the McCaskies versus Jerry Reinsdorf versus the Ricketts, who the Cubs are free falling right now, and they'll cry poor. The Wirtz family lucked into Connor Bedard. Let's hope they don't screw that situation up, right? It's just to be a disaster right now. Matt Eberflus is a defensive coach who had very little pressure as a defensive coordinator in Indianapolis. His scheme did not generate pressure. He had good athletes on the field, so they were to play a bend, not break defense. 59 players right now in the NFL have more sacks than the Chicago Bears. 59 players in the NFL have more sacks than the Chicago Bears right now. That is an absolute embarrassment. You could fire Matt Eberflus tomorrow. You want Luke Getsy to be your interim head coach? Because that sounds awful, right? You don't even have a defensive coordinator anymore, so I don't even know who would run that situation. And then you've got Richard Hightower, who is an average at best special teams coach. So I don't even know who the hell would be the interim coach if things got bad in the next couple of weeks, which it could, with the Broncos, Commanders, Vikings, and Raiders. I believe I have those 4 games in a row correctly. So I don't know. I think if things do get bad this weekend, I think Luke Getsy will be the sacrificial lamb, but also you're on a short week against Washington. So, I think these 2 games coming up are going to be very telling. I'll say this. As we now start to turn our heads towards Caleb Williams and what could potentially be with 2 potential top 3 picks, because the Panthers stink too, it would be very Bears if they kind of went on a little mini run here to take themselves out of that consideration, win a game against the Broncos, the Commanders, and the Raiders in a couple weeks. I would not be surprised, because as bad as they are, I don't think they're going to go 0-17, but they might go 3-13 and something like that, right? And so these next 4 games, these are probably some of the most winnable games on their schedule this year. If they can't get 2 wins out of this coming up, it's going to get it's already dark. It's going to be midnight dark for this organization coming up.
Yeah, it's I feel like there's quite a good chance that it's a full year until they win a game with all the bad vibes and whatever you want to call them, just the bad product that they're putting out there as a whole, as a football team, with the Broncos up next, then the Commanders, Vikings, and Raiders. And it is an absolute mess. Everybody, rightfully so in the comments saying as much. Only one person saying, whoa, it's 3 games, fellas. And the good news is,
and it's not 3 games. It's not like we're approaching 1 year since they won a football game. They've lost like 15 games in a row.
I think he was being facetious, but yeah, it's been
agreed.
Yeah, I mean, even with the turnover of the roster like we've seen here, it's the same shit product. They got you the number 1 overall pick, and now it's like you said, Ross, you're really thinking about getting the 1st and the 4th overall pick, something like that. If you could get Marvin Harrison Jr. and Caleb Williams, or at least one of those guys. But that I don't buy that. You're also hearing this rumor, or just this hypothesis of maybe like Atlanta going for Justin Fields. If the Bears were to be done with Justin Fields, him going there would be pretty insane. That's just way too far ahead in my eyes. Obviously, that's not too much is going to change from this last game to this game, because it's 3 games into the season. What's going to make them change now? Eberflus already said he plans to call the plays. He's not going to appoint a new DC, so defense can only continue to be worse. The good news again is that the Bears host a defense worse than them Sunday at Soldier Field with the Broncos, who have again the worst defense in the league. Broncos now allowing a league worst 177 yards rushing per game. So the Bears should pound the rock and then set up Justin Fields in theory. Russell Wilson being pretty inconsistent. He went from one fantastic game a week before last to sort of a dud. And now you get a sort of get right game. We talked about the product on the field. It sucks to see these guys. You can only imagine what the locker room feels like. You saw that DJ Moore when he was picked up with Devin White, I think. And Devin White's like, man, I miss chasing you. They're not using you. Right. And he's like, yeah, preach, basically, in so many words. And you could say that. It's just, just terrible offense as a whole. It's not just particularly his fault. It's all of these guys' fault, man. But you see quitting a lot of them. The only guy who feels like, he is, you saw it again with Justin Fields in the presser today, and a bunch of guys who have to do these press conferences after practices. It's rough. Like the only bright spots are like Roshan Johnson. Every time he touches the ball, he starts mowing down people, is one lone bright spot of that offense. And again, they've played tough competition. You play the world champs. You've seen the polar opposite of the Bears. They're better on every aspect, from the front office to the fucking kicker. You know what I mean? So now the Bears, again, they haven't won a game in 330 some days for a reason, right, Ross?
That's right. That's Caleb Williams on line 1 saying he's already looking at property in Chicago.
That's my landline
right now. I see a comment here from Joel O'Donnell in the comments. Listen, if the Bears somehow get the number 1 overall pick and Caleb Williams is coming to Chicago, I guarantee you Matt Eberflus and his coaching staff is not coaching him, and I don't even know if Marion Poles is the one making that pick. That's how bad things might be for that situation. I think they go completely brand new coaching staff for sure, and potentially general manager. But yeah, listen, you talked about it with this Sunday, right? You're 0-3. You're looking for your first win. This is it right here. This is a home game. It's a noon game at home for you. You still have some semblance of a crowd before they start to put paper bags on their heads. You talked about the Broncos numbers. The Broncos right now, they are the 32 ranked defense in terms of yards given up. They are dead last in the league in terms of passing touchdowns. They are 29th in the league for passing yards, and they are 32nd in the league right now in rushing yards. Theoretically, this is the game that you should be able to hang 35 on the team. I'm not saying they are. I don't have any confidence in this Bears team right now to hang 35 on anybody. And Russell Wilson has looked very, very shaky early on here. They gave up 70 points to the Miami Dolphins on Sunday, right? This is the game that you feel like you should be able to put some points on the board. The Commanders scored 35 on them as well. It's also a game that you should be able to get some pressure on Russell Wilson. He is not the same guy who can move in the pocket anymore. So if you were to ever pick a Bears win, it needs to be this Sunday, because if not, I do think things get very dark. This is the best chance that they have in a very long time at winning a game. And then you go on a short week, which I think is to the Bears' advantage, because I think they just need to stay in rhythm and kind of just keep it moving here. You get the Commanders in Washington. Sam Howell right now, I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe he's the most sacked quarterback in the league right now, or he's definitely in the top 3. And so that's how you kind of play that. Remember, the Bears played a very close game against the Commanders last year, where Darnell Mooney dropped a touchdown pass that would have won a game. These are your top 2 best shots in a long time to win 2 football games, until maybe you get the Raiders coming in town a couple of weeks from now. So, this is probably, I was looking at the schedule. This is certainly the worst game on the schedule this weekend. This is the game that nobody's going to want to have on the red zone or on the little quad box. I know the Chargers and Vikings are also 2-0-3 teams, but those teams are at least a little bit more exciting than this. This becomes the worst situation in the league. And I had a buddy who was in Denver this week for a Counting Crows concert. And he told me, listen, it's bad here. It's bad there too. They're panicking over there as well. They're paying Sean Payton a lot of money. And so, that situation, this could be Russell Wilson's last stand, according to the people in Denver. If they don't pull this game out and he looks like crap, I think they're going to move on to Jarrett Stidham after this game. So there's a little bit of extra motivation there by the Bears to put the nail in the Russell Wilson Broncos coffin. So I don't know. I'm not even predicting anymore on what happens. I can't. I can't say what happens. I do think we get a better effort on offense from Sunday from the Bears. But am I predicting a win? Hell no. I'd be stupid to say that I'm going to predict anything, any kind of wins anymore, or say I'm going to gamble on this and that. I think just we're all going to watch with one eye open and pray for the best.
If we watch it all, they put out an unwatchable product thus far, especially, I mean, in every aspect, right? Again, I said I turned it off basically after that first half of the game against the Chiefs. The Bears, the fact that they're dogs at home, 3.5 points to Denver, after Denver just surrendered 70 points to the Miami Dolphins, who are a juggernaut, is right. It's deservedly so with the Chicago Bears team. You just want to see any sort of signs of life at this point. Fields and company are all just looking so deflated after 3 weeks of football. It's 3 weeks, and you've had these other weeks to prepare outside of the season, the off season, to prepare for this. So there's no shot at the playoffs. There's no shot at a division title or anything like that. You have a good shot at the number 1 overall pick, but that these guys want to win. They still want to have good performances for their careers, for their fan base, for themselves. When you see a bit of progress, you see the shit through 3 games, it's just unbearable. I also don't predict the Bears to win. I do hope that they get Fields and utilize him against the Broncos, going back to any sort of game plan to get the first win of the season. And in 300 some days, it's been so long, haven't won a home game in a year. You got to run the football. Lean on Roschon Johnson, lean on Justin Fields, more designed runs. Like, what do you have to lose at this point? And then get some confidence for Justin. And these receivers need to go after some jump balls, and he just needs to, have some Jay Cutler in him, throw into triple coverage, for God's sakes, because you don't have much to lose here. You just have to figure out what you have and have a little sign of life, and then, build some confidence going into that short week against Washington, like you mentioned, right, Ross? I mean, it's pretty unbearable, though. And from a local standpoint, you have this and some other matchup of 0-3 teams. I feel like it's it's abysmal. You got to get a friend with Sunday ticket.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You have to play loose and free this Sunday. At this point, it doesn't matter. The record doesn't matter. You have to get a win. You have not gotten a win on this organization, like we said, in almost a year. I think it was October 22nd was the last time the Chicago Bears got a win of last year. It's going to be October 1st on Sunday. So you have to get a win. You have to play loose and free. Hopefully they get Nate Davis back in the lineup this week. That should help the running game. And Khalil Herbert, he's got less than 100 yards in the season right now. Like what was supposed to be their strength going into the year is also a weakness as well. And so you've got to start playing nasty. You got to act like you give a shit out there. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like a lot of these guys do. It looks like they're playing through the motions and they're getting their ass kicked. Where's your pride as a football player? Where's your pride as an organization? Where's your pride as a head coach, as an offensive coordinator, as a general manager, as a quarterback who knows that everybody in the league is talking trash about you? And when they do these QB rankings, they have you dead last in the league right now. They have you dead last. It's you and Zach Wilson battling for 32nd in the league right now as a starting quarterback. And so I would like to see some fire from this football team and some nastiness on Sunday and act like they have a pulse and they give a shit. Because if not, this could get to an 0-12, 0-13 season super duper fast. And at that point, Soldier Field is going to be a ghost town by Thanksgiving. And I think a lot of people in House Hall are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah, no question about it. All goes down. Bears, Broncos, Bears looking for their first win of the season. Sunday at noon Central Time. And again, the Broncos are favored, and Broncos just coming off that huge loss. I just want to see Justin Fields smile again, man. It's been so long. So tough for him out there, and really meant any of these Bears players. It's very tough. But, to switch focus to the rest of the NFL, it's been it's been up and down with some of the top contenders going into this season. I think, the big outright surprise, we just mentioned them, as far as just how good they've looked in every facet, has been the Miami Dolphins, and now how they're on pace to be one of those teams that could maybe put up 600 points in a season. You remember the Denver Broncos when it was Peyton Manning and whatever that, his plethora of receivers he was throwing to during those Super Bowl runs back in the mid 2010s. It's a very good team with a ton of talent. Obviously, Tyreek Hill around Tua Tagovailoa, and even without Jalen Waddle didn't even play this past Sunday. It was incredible. All the run involved with Raheem Mostert and Devin Chan, and it was incredible to see. And then, the teams that we thought were not really going to take a step back from last season, as it looked like the Eagles and the 49ers in the NFC, just really impressive overall. 49ers, that goes back to Thursday night against, the Giants, who they haven't really, who aren't presenting much of a challenge. But again, going back to just this really great embarrassment of riches on offense, making Brock Purdy look like Peyton Manning out there. Then Christian McCaffrey to boot just really does wonders for you. And then some surprises like the Browns, beating the tar out of the Titans 27-3. The Lions improving to 2-1. We thought that they might be the favorites for the division, but then the Packers staying right in there as well. Like I mentioned, with Jordan Love leading the way to an 18-17 win over the Saints. Come from behind win was very impressive. But the Dolphins, obviously, that big just scoring outburst was insane. They could have even put up more, and then they did the sportsmanship thing where they don't put up the field goal to get the record, which is just horseshit. Like, come on, you already put up 70. What are you saving the 3 points for? But I digress. I mean, the Jets are an abject disaster after Aaron Rodgers being out. The Bills looked back to being the Bills thumping the Commanders 37-3. We see that the Cowboys kind of came back down to earth when they got beaten by Arizona. I don't think many people picked the Cowboys to lose that game, of course. But again, Eagles, the teams that look good from last year, mostly look good. But, it's also tough, before I get your thoughts, Ross, too, with whatever's happening with the Bengals is pretty right now. And they were able to eke out a win, which they really needed at home against the Rams, who also desperately needed a win, but who dropped to 1-2. Bengals got their first win. Joe Burrow just playing through this injury is just really tough to see. And this whole team that's, a couple years removed from a Super Bowl run and who was in the AFC Championship last year, it's pretty incredible. But what were your impressions? What are your impressions after 3 weeks of football here?
Yeah, I think the two best teams in the league right now look very similar to each other because they are very similar to each other. And it's no secret that, Kyle Shanahan was the one that brought this offense mostly to the league, through his father, through the old Bill Walsh system and things like that. But if you watch the 49ers and you watch the Dolphins, what they do is they have tremendous team speed, number one. They've got they're the two fastest teams in the league, especially on offense. And then what they do is they put both of those guys in motion pre-snap, and the defense has no clue what to do. Are you going to run with Deebo Samuel and Tyreek Hill pre-snap? A lot of times also it makes it easier for your quarterback. If he doesn't see the corner follow those guys, he knows that those guys are in zone, so he knows those little pockets that he can throw the ball in. These guys are two offensive geniuses that make the job very easy for their quarterbacks by doing a lot of things before the snap. A lot of things that the Bears don't do on offense is what the 49ers and Dolphins do. They make the things easier for their quarterback, and all of a sudden try stopping the run when you see Deebo Samuel running or you see Tyreek Hill running before the snap and you think you got to go chase him. And then all of a sudden they hand the football off and there goes Christian McCaffrey and there goes Raheem Mostert, who are also two guys that run 4.3, 4.4 speed. And that's why those teams are very successful. They make the quarterback's job super easy, and then they use their team speed to their advantage to really put the defense on their heels. And I think that's what we don't see in Chicago with our situation. We don't ever see Darnell Mooney or Chase Claypool in motion pre-snap to allow Khalil Herbert to get more space, but I digress on that. And then they also have very good defenses as well. So those two teams right now look on a collision course to meet in Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. Shout out to my guy Usher for performing at halftime. I predicted that over the summer. Predicted that over the summer, and it came true. Shout out to him. That's going to be exciting. But I mean, those two teams are easily the cream of the crop right now in the NFL. You talked about the Bengals. Joe Burrow does not look right. That calf, obviously is very uncomfortable for him. It's hindering him. It's hindering that offense right now. He's been short on a lot of his throws. He missed all of training camp. He looks rusty. He doesn't look healthy out there. They gutted out a win, but it's going to be something to keep an eye on because it's still very early in the season. If he can't be 100%, we see this every year. There are teams that have been up here, and then the next year they kind of fall back down. And they miss the playoffs. Every year we get about 6 to 7 teams in turnover in playoffs. Keep an eye on that Bengals situation because they could be one of them. The surprise for me to start the year, I didn't think the Vikings would be 0-3. I thought that they I thought the defense would still be decent enough, and I thought that offense, especially with Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins, would still be good enough to carry them. But I think they might be at a point right now where if they lose this game this Sunday, and they probably won't because they're playing the Panthers, but if they lose this football game this Sunday, why not trade Kirk Cousins to the Jets? Like, what are you holding on to him for? You might as well blow this thing up as well. I thought it was a really good win last week by the Steelers as well. I talked about when we started the season, I liked the Steelers, and they got their asses whooped by the 49ers. Well, guess what? The 49ers are going to beat the hell out of a lot of teams. But since then, they've kind of righted the ship a little bit. They beat the Raiders this weekend. Now they're 2-1, and they kind of jump back into that division hunt. That division is going to be just cutthroat all year. You hit it on the head. Cleveland's going to hang in there. We know Baltimore is going to hang in there. That defense is just going to be – that division is going to be very, very feisty this year. And then, Old Faithful, the Eagles, they just keep cruising, right? They're 3-0. We might see that 49ers-Eagles rematch, and hopefully Brock Purdy is healthy for that football game because that would be a fun NFC Championship game if we saw it.
Eagles with their coveted tush push, as it were, although Philly has now officially renamed it the brotherly shove. The old quarterback sneak.
That should be illegal. At some point,
yeah.
I think the NFL is going to have to ban that play. The play that he scored on the touchdown on Monday night, he hikes the ball and not Travis Kelce, Jason Kelce gets up and he looked like he didn't know where he was at. These guys are destroying each other. They're trying to get as low as possible. It has just basically turned into a rugby scrum, and it's dangerous. And then what's going to happen next is somebody's going to try and jump over the pile to try and get to the quarterback, and then that's where really injuries are going to happen. So I think they're going to address that situation in the offseason. But until then, it's working for them. Yep, they run it better than anybody in the NFL, and keep stacking those touchdowns for Jalen Hurts.
I mean, yeah, guaranteed Jalen Hurts touchdown with that. JJ Watt he said it was an unpopular opinion how they weren't allowed to push from behind. The Eagles would still be as successful at QB sneaks because that offensive line is just supremely talented. That's why they can just put whoever in running back there, and Jalen Hurts continues to rack up yards. In the comments, it was also mentioned, we got to give love to the rookies too. And as far as a rookie standout, you got to mention CJ Stroud. And I know that it's obviously a rough start for the Texans with only one win, but he did put up 280 yards and 2 touchdowns, made a stud out of Tank Dell, and everybody went to the waiver wire for him in fantasy. Put up 37 on the Jaguars, who were, an AFC favorite going into the season. They've dropped to 1-2, kind of a surprise in itself. But you can see why CJ Stroud is just quieting the haters now, and he has more. What is a terrible stat is more 300-yard passing games than Justin Fields, of course, at this point, and probably a lot of other quarterbacks in the league right now. But he has been very impressive, and certainly I think when you look at just overall rookie of the year, certainly offensive rookie of the year, he's got that in the bag 3 games in. It's a long season, and hopefully he just stays healthy and continues to cook like this. But really impressive. The kid out of Ohio State just shows us why he was a top tier quarterback going into it.
100%. And, obviously DeMeco Ryans is the head coach there. He's doing an awesome job so far, just building a culture there. But we talk about specifically for the offense and what they're able to do for the quarterback. And CJ Stroud looks so much more comfortable out there than Bryce Young, than guys like Justin Fields. And you're like, well, how is this working? What's going on with CJ Stroud? It all goes back to the same thing. Pre-motion snaps, making the job easier for the quarterback. And then you say, well, who's the offensive coordinator for your Houston Texans? It's Bobby Slowick. Bobby Slowick was the passing game coordinator for the 49ers the last 2 years, and he was an offensive assistant for them for the last 4 years. All roads lead back to bring in smart people that have been really successful in a situational offense for a long time. And people always talk about the McVay tree and the Shanahan tree and how it might be overrated or this and that. It's not. You have to bring in these really high intelligent guys that are used to high level success with, you saw what Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is Mr. Irrelevant, and look what Slowick was able to do as a passing game coordinator with him last year. Sure. And I'm not taking anything away from CJ Stroud because I think he's an awesome young man. I think he's playing very well. But those things matter in the NFL, especially with these young players and these young quarterbacks. The bar is here with your Slowicks and Shanahans and Mike McDaniels of the world, and even your Matt LaFleur's of the world. And then there's fucking Luke Getsy all the way down here. You know what I'm saying? And that stuff really does matter for these young guys at the next level.
And that's a team where you're seeing was similar to the Bears in the draft lottery last year for the number 1 pick, and able to get a quarterback who, again, is surrounded by some better talent, seemingly, and better coaching. It's just a better, it's better chemistry. It's a better just vibe overall. It's it's still a 1-2 team. They'll still probably be pretty bad, but you're starting to see some progress in how you should be turning these teams around. I agree with you. It's just offense is so paramount, and the offensive minds, these great offensive minds like the Shanahans and the McDaniels of the world, who are able to tutor and mentor these young quarterbacks, and just we're seeing this age of quarterbacks, now with the retirement of Tom Brady and these older guys, we're seeing some just incredible quarterbacks. Justin Herbert, we haven't talked about yet. He's having a great season thus far. Yeah. Chargers, obviously having some struggles, but they were able to beat the Vikings, as you talked about, and send them to 0-3 and put up 28 points. He had 405 yards and 3 touchdowns. I know he'll be without Mike Williams for the rest of the season, but he's a guy who's looking great. And then you talk about, of course, Pat Mahomes just doing what Pat Mahomes does. He hasn't taken a step backwards at all. It is just circling back to the Bengals, when you thought that certainly that they're a well-rounded team and still the tops of the AFC. it all certainly feels like it goes back to Joe Burrow and how if he can jump out of the slump, they might have to rest him for a week or two because he looks like he's playing through pain or there's something going on with him. It's very concerning if you're a Bengals fan.
Yeah, completely agree. Because you thought that team was going to go to the Super Bowl this year, and for them to take a step back this year, it's going to be really hard for them. I still think that they can right the ship a little bit, but you're 100% correct. They're going to have to get Joe Burrow healthy. That cap thing that is a Pandora's box for other injuries. Knock on wood. Hopefully, we don't see anything worse for him, but. Just as one of the bright young stars of the league, I hope Joe Burrow does get healthy sooner than later because I do love watching him play at a really high level.
Does Trevor Siemian do anything for you for the New York Jets?
No. I listen. I think they're trying to tread water right now until one of these veteran quarterbacks can come available via a trade. Maybe a guy like Kirk Cousins, a guy like a Matt Stafford can be available, something like that. But listen, they have to start stacking wins too, because if they keep losing and you wait until week 6, week 7 to make a trade, and you're 2-4 or 2-5, you're out the playoffs anyway. The AFC is tough, and it's a very tough conference. And so I think that they should have made a move sooner than later already. The rumor was they tried to reach out to Matt Ryan, and he told them no, probably because Matt Ryan knows that he's a statue right there behind the offensive line now. And he saw what just happened to Aaron Rodgers. He's like, I'm not signing up for that. I can put on a blazer every Sunday and do a game for CBS and not have to get my ass kicked. But I don't want to sign up for that situation. So, it's going to be interesting to see, what it looks like for them. It sucks from a fan standpoint, because there are a lot of Jets primetime games this year on TV. And if they continue to look bad week after week, we're in for just a big struggle. Again, speaking of the Chiefs, they got the Chiefs.
Doesn't get any easier, yeah. With the Chiefs.
They got the Chiefs Sunday Night Football in whatever the hell they call that stadium now.
MetLife Stadium.
MetLife Stadium. There you go. So yeah, that's going to be a super struggle, because now you get Pat Mahomes, who's really starting to heat up, and Taylor Swift might be in the building for that. She's not going to turn down an opportunity to hang out in a New York press box or something like that. So yeah.
Oh my. We glazed over that and the effect that we obviously know that Taylor Swift was at this game, and Greg Olson and Burkhart were talking more about Swift because the game was just terrible as a whole. It's good timing for our dear friend who's on at 7:30. It's John Buffone, ladies and gentlemen. Follow me on Twitter at JD Buffone. He came in just for the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift conversation. Are they going to make it, John?
Oh, wow. My timing was impeccable.
You a Swiftie? Are you a Swiftie?
No.
Okay.
I mean, listen, nothing against her. She's incredibly successful, incredibly talented. I'm not really big into the music, and unfortunately there wasn't much of a product on the field to talk about, so that had to dominate the conversation throughout the broadcast. And I live on the East Coast, so Fox tried to put me out of my misery by switching this broadcast off. They went to a different game, but me, being the person that I am, went right to my Sunday ticket and watched the rest of that debacle, where we saw more Taylor Swift than we did Bears first downs. So that's essentially that was a real fun game to watch.
Yeah,
it was. And all those she had those red New Balances on that all of a sudden were sold out the next day, and Travis Kelce's jersey numbers, the memorabilia sales spiked after that. Yeah, absolutely. The Taylor Swift effect was there.
Yeah, it certainly is there. And getting that, that's a huge demographic that obviously the NFL, I feel like, largely misses, that, 18 to 45 group of women that just like tripled their ratings. Everything was good for the Chiefs. Travis Kelce's obviously jersey sales numbers going up. That's not what we want to talk to you about, though, John.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sure you'll go over it all on Buffone 55 coming up at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. We talked about the Bears at length in the first half of the show, but just to circle back to it, and I know you're going to break it down at length with a lot of other NFL storylines. It's disappointing in every aspect. If there's just one particular aspect, if you could boil it down with the Bears, whether it be Justin Fields' development, whether it be coaching, injuries, something like that? Just what is that worst disappointment for you with this Bears team 3 games in, John?
I'm looking at it holistically. Is I'm disappointed in myself because I believed them again. It's like I constantly talk about the Bears as a toxic relationship that I have, where it's just like they said they're going to change. They said, they did all the right things. They said all the right things. They signed all the right free agents. They made the draft picks. They invested, and they tore it down and built it back up. And I believed them again. I believed that things were going to be different, where it wasn't, there was supposed to be actual progress. And so holistically, I'm disappointed in myself because it's been the same thing for essentially my entire lifetime. I never got to see 1985. I got to see them play in the Super Bowl in the mid 2000s, but that's about it. And if eventually when someone keeps showing you who they are, you got to believe them at some point. And so it's the point that I allowed myself to believe that this was going to be that next step process where we're going to be in the hunt, where they were going to be a wild card contender at the end of the season. And this was going to be the next step for the offense, and the defense was going to be much better because they invested $100 million into it. And, Eberflus was going to, fine tune things on the defense, and Getsy was going to, have this new exotic offense with Justin Fields running and throwing. And we got none of it, guys. We got none of it. You look at some of the other teams in the division, and I know that the Vikings are winless, but Kirk Cousins is playing very well offensively. They got real talent on the offense. You look at Detroit, they come out swinging. They beat the Chiefs in week 1, and now they look like the favorite in the division. The Packers look decades ahead of the Bears in week 1, and it looks like they found something in Jordan Love. Maybe he's not going to be Hall of Fame caliber like the other two, but it looks like he's capable of running the offense there. So what do the Bears have to hang their hat on? Nothing. Like that, it's the hopelessness that is the most disappointing, where it's you thought that you were going to get something worth talking about. And we're having the same conversations we've been having for the last 2 years, and for the most part, the better part of a decade.
Yeah, despite the roster overhaul, you can't point to one aspect of this team that has improved from last year, and that's a huge reason why they're 0-3. And you hit it on the head too, John. Just this division, you look around, and every other team, despite, I know the Vikings have the same record as you, but at least their quarterback is leading the league in passing yards. And, again, it helps that they're 0-3, but it's tough sledding. And going into this Broncos game, it's just going to be unwatchable. What else you got going on the show at 7:30, John?
Well, we'll talk about that game a little bit because the Bears unfortunately still have to play football. But so we will break that down a little bit. But we're going to talk about a lot of different aspects of the team because, well, to be honest, you can only spice these, as you guys know, you can only spice these shows up so much whenever it's the same damn thing over and over again. Where they haven't won a game since almost Halloween of last year. But where we will talk about who is on the hot seat. Fans are clearly thinking that everyone is, but who logistically or realistically speaking, who really is on the hot seat? I don't think Ryan Poles necessarily is, but I think everything else is in play if things really do fall apart towards the end of the season. I can't see the McCaskies overhauling the GM position because they are yearning for some kind of stability. But I think everything else is in play. And what is that threshold? What is it? Is it 5 games? Is it 6 games that saves somebody's coaching job? Or is it, is it already made up if you're gonna have a product like this on the field? So we're gonna be talking about what some of those scenarios are because we already have to talk about the offseason. It's week 4 and we're already talking about the offseason and mock drafts because that's the life of a Bears fan. Let's hope who's going to be in the draft, who could possibly be a new head coach, who are some of the candidates. And so it's crazy that we're talking about this in September, but we shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think these next 2 games are Luke Getsy's coaching for his life. I think if the offense continues to be stale against the Broncos, who we talked about earlier, they're the worst defense in the league right now. They're even statistically worse than the Bears. And then against the Commanders as well. I think he loses his job on a long extended week before the Vikings game. From there. And then you talk about Matt Eberflus. I don't think that they would fire him in season, but if this thing gets first overall pick bad, which it's on a trajectory right now, the Bears are almost 40% favorites to get the first overall pick between them having the Panthers pick and their own pick. I do think they clean house, because if you're going to bring a guy in like a Caleb Williams or even a Michael Penix Jr., those are your two top quarterbacks in college right now. There's no way you can have this coaching staff continue to coach them going forward. You've already seen what happens with one quarterback. You can't afford to bring in a guy like Caleb Williams, who could be a generational prospect, and have Matt, Eberflus coach him. I think you talk about the Lions offense. Boy, that Ben Johnson's sitting right there, and he could possibly be your next Chicago Bears head coach if this thing gets really bad and they go out there and they take another quarterback again at the top of the draft.
Yeah, honestly, guys, it's upsetting that we have to talk about this, but it really is. I mean, just to put things in perspective, the Bears are a home underdog against a winless team that just lost by 50 points.
That's worst defense too.
Yeah. That's how bad things are, where no one has any faith in this team to do anything. And so they never do bring all three in at the same time. They never do bring in the GM, the head coach, and the quarterback all in the same time. It's always kind of a hodgepodge there. And Matt Nagy didn't pick Trubisky, Eberflus and Getsy didn't pick Fields. And so they never really do bring that all in at the same time. So I am interested to see what they might do this offseason, because I think Justin Fields might be playing for his life too, because as far as his starting role with the Bears, because they got to make a decision of whether or not they're picking up that 5th-year option. If you're going off of what you see now, they probably don't. And so he might be looking, if the Bears draft a quarterback high, they're going to probably try to trade Justin Fields. And so he's going to try to put on as much tape as possible to make himself enticing to other teams that might say, hey, the Bears screwed him up. He didn't screw himself up. So there's a lot of different, variables going on in there. And we're not really sure which direction it's going to be, but I think we can be certain that it's not going to end well.
Yeah, you hit on the head. There's no organizational continuity from the top down, and that's been a problem for a long time now. So if they did clean house at the first overall pick, I would actually encourage it. Listen, Rick Spielman, Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, I'm in. You can sign me up for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the common mantra of the Bears fan. Anything other than this. Yes. And we've been saying that for a long time, and it sucks that we have to have these conversations about, no, he was worse, no, Trestman was worse, no, John Fox was worse. We never have a conversation about who was the best, because we can't think of it. It's always about the conversation of who actually screwed up the worst. Was Trestman worse than Eberflus, or was John Fox the worst, or was Phil Emery the worst GM, or Matt Nagy, because of all the promise we had of 2018, was that the most disappointing? Every conversation we have as Bears fans are about who let us down the most. It's never about who delivered the best. We never have those conversations.
That's right.
The saga continues. That's just a taste of what John will bring you all at 7:30 right here on the Barroom Network. Remember to follow him on Twitter at JD Buffone. Have a great show, John. Thanks for joining us. We'll let you go. Bear down, I guess.
Hey, anytime, fellas. Love chatting with you. I'll see you later.
See you, John.
All right, later, John. There he is, John Buffone. And before we get out of here, I alluded to it at length. We've talked football heavy, of course, just looking ahead to next week. And good game tomorrow night with the Lions and Packers, as, again, they look light years ahead of the Bears in that aspect. But, as far as off-season NBA news goes, this was as big as it gets. And we knew that Damian Lillard was very unhappy, and it finally was broken today by none other than Adrian Wojnarowski that Damian Lillard, the star guard, is out of Portland and now traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. And that's a big trade with a lot of ripple effects, of course. Holy shit, I did not expect that today. It's as far as the trade itself, it's Lillard going to Milwaukee as part of a 3-team deal. They got Phoenix involved in there. Basically, the headline is that the Bucks get Lillard, the Suns get Yusuf Nurkic. They lose DeAndre Ayton to the Blazers, and the Blazers get Drew Holiday and DeAndre Ayton. And Drew Holiday, that's a tough loss for this Bucks team, where he was an all-star with them, a fantastic defender, all-around player. But you get Dame time, and both him and Giannis are big fans of each other. What'd you think of the trade, Ross, before we get out of here?
Fantastic trade. It's a fantastic trade. Listen, Giannis he's a very light, he's a very mellow guy. He doesn't raise his voice. He's not very stern. He's not very pushy. But the last couple of weeks, he was essentially saying, I just want to win, and I'm going to win somewhere. I'm going to find somewhere where I can win. And that's a little subtle jab at saying, listen, you've got to do something here to get me better talent, or else I can go to New York or Philadelphia or LA or some other place. And, Giannis wants to stay a Buck. He's been saying that for a long time. He's an awesome ambassador for the city of Milwaukee and that franchise. But the theme of this whole show to me is, what do good organizations do? And good organizations went out there and say, okay, let's get one of the 75 greatest players of all time to play with our super duper star in Giannis Antetokounmpo. And they did. And now all of a sudden, with the situation in Philly, they're a mess. Boston is in flux as well. You have to figure that Milwaukee's back on top again as the favorites of the Eastern Conference. Especially, they want revenge after the way they went out in the first round last year against the Miami Heat. So awesome trade for the Bucks. Good organizations take chances, take big swings, and when they have good quality talent in-house, they do what they can to cultivate that. This is only going to help Giannis and that whole entire team.
You would certainly think so. Even with Dame and the back nine of his career, as it were, just wasted away with Portland for so long, finally getting out of there, a fresh start. You lose Drew Holiday, but that's a very tough starting five and a tough roster as a whole. Like you said, tips the scales in the favor for them in the East, and then it just looks like another bad season. Bad news for the Bulls as the Bucks get richer, no question. We're out of time. Thanks to everybody for listening in, watching on YouTube right here on the Barroom Network. Remember, if you've missed any of the show, it will be on YouTube after this, on Spotify, iTunes for the audio-only versions of the show. I'm at the Real Evan Mac on Twitter. Ross is at Ross Reed. Follow Barroom Network at Barroom Network as well. Like, subscribe, tell a friend or two. Bear down, I guess. Again, tough game Sunday for them. It's just an unwatchable game. They both deserve to lose. Maybe it'll end in a tie, perhaps. But yeah, that'd be hilarious. But as usual, be good to each other out there. We say so long, everybody.
Peace.
Thank you.